What's up everyone, I'm CallumOnToast, and in today's video I'm going to be bringing back a trio of Pokemon that are only using punch moves in the Go Battle League, but with a new member in Kecleon, which of course gained access to both Thunder Punch and Dynamic Punch this season, and unlike the other two Pokemon on this team, its recommended moveset is actually now a Triple Punch set, with Sucker Punch as the fast move. Now for Gengar and Lucario, both their Triple Punch movesets are far from optimal, and it does make certain matchups that should be dominant a lot more uncomfortable, but also gives play into Pokemon that normally would be very strong into them and makes for some very entertaining and honestly incredibly unpredictable gameplay. Now anyways, with that being said, let's get into the question of the day. Which buffed Pokemon got a lot of hype at the start of the season, but everyone now seems to have already forgotten about it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that being said, let's get into the battles now. Let's go into the first battle, leading Shadow Gengar into Shadow Quagsire. Of course, not the best matchup for me, however, Lucario does have a much worse matchup, given that I am on Bullet Punch. Bullet Punch is going to be resisted. However, we fire off the Shadow Punch, it does big damage, and the opponent throws on CMP. So at this point, I'm actually just happy to shield my Gengar. They fire off a Mud Bomb, and then they swap out into Dusknoir. Now, unfortunately, because this is a non-Shadow, it doesn't look like I will be able to shield once and fully farm them down, so I'm going to shield the Dynamic Punch, and then I will have to throw a Thunder Punch. If they want to shield here, they should be able to reach another move, but they do no shield, and their final Pokemon is going to be a Tinkaton. Now, this is not the best matchup for any of my team members, really, but we can go for Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch is going to be shielded, and now I swap out into Lucario, where, of course, a Gigaton Hammer is resisted. Bulldoze is super effective, and it will comfortably two-shot us, but we do waste pretty much all of their energy. At this point, we're going to wait out the switch clock, as the opponent will be able to swap out of this matchup, but they swap back into Quagsire just to be fully farmed down. We're now going to fire off a Shadow Punch just before the opponent does reach another Bulldoze. Shadow Punch grabs the final shield, we swap out there, and we will force the opponent to full send a Gigaton Hammer. Gigaton Hammer gonna get the KO up against the Kecleon, but Shadow Gengar comes back in. Shadow Punch gonna connect. It doesn't KO, but one resisted Sucker Punch is able to get the fast move farm down, and I'm able to take that game. So, heading into the next battle, GG's to that previous opponent, by the way, we're going to see a Typhlosion in the lead. Now, Shadow Gengar up against neutral fast move pressure, basically just dies to everything here. As you can see, 4 Incinerates will get a full farm down, but the opponent actually throws some energy. This is very baffling to me. They could have just fast move farmed me down. So at this point, I'm happy to let the Gengar go down. The opponent looks like they're going to lag a little bit there. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in this matchup, but I'm going to shield the Blast Burn as they now swap out into Altaria. Now, unfortunately, we've got Thunder Punch rather than something like Ice Punch, which would be great coverage up against Altaria, but we can just spam out these Thunder Punches. What I'm hoping to do is force the opponent to throw some energy. Kecleon should be able to just barely hang on to a Sky Attack here, and then I will swap out into my Lucario. Now, of course, Bullet Punches are neutral damage here. I fire off a Power Punch on the CMP tire, winning CMP, and Power Punch actually grabs the final shield. So at this point, this could be a Flamethrower. I'm definitely going to shield. It is the Flamethrower, and their final Pokemon going to be a Wigglytuff, and this is a matchup where, of course, having Bullet Punch is so much better for us, hitting for super effective damage. Thunder Punch gets the KO there. We're able to resist the Bullet Punch, farm down Typhlosion, and so the opponent just concedes the match. So, GG's up on there. Into the next battle, I see Corviknight in the lead. So, not the best matchup for me. I'm actually going to swap out into my only real response in Kecleon, of course. Lucario, when it is on Force Palm, has a decent matchup into the Corviknight, but unfortunately, Bullet Punch is resisted. However, the opponent clearly doesn't have a great answer to Kecleon, as I'm able to land a Dynamic Punch into the Licky Licky. And this one, I'm actually just happy to no shield and then fully fast move farm them down. Now, you could argue maybe I should have shielded there because Body Slam would do a little bit more damage than an Air Cutter, and it would force them to either full send a payback, or they'd have to take a lot of damage here. We do at least reach back-to-back Thunder Punches, but the opponent going for a very aggressive Sand Attack farm down. Now, I'm going to come in with Lucario. Of course, they can't full send a payback. They're going to have to just settle for an Air Cutter. Air Cutter, not going to deal too much damage there, but they do have quite a lot of energy already. So, I'm going to look to shield the next Air Cutter as the opponent now going to swap out into Jellicent, but we've got access to Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch, going to hit for super effective damage. Now, what I probably should have done there is stayed in for a little while with the Lucario, just build up a tiny bit of energy before swapping into Gengar, because whilst we do get the full farm down, we don't really come out with that much energy. We are are one away from back-to-back charge moves right now, but the opponent does have a lot of energy of their own. So perfect timing by the opponent throw just as we reach the next Shadow Punch. Air Cutter gets the KO. It's a race, and the opponent able to come out on top, living with 1 HP in a dream, reaching another Air Cutter. Perfect energy management from the opponent, taking me out, and unfortunately I lose that game. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. I can see Jellicent in the lead. So we're going to farm up to a Shadow Punch, and then I'm actually going to swap out into my Kecleon. Of course, I don't expect them to full send a Shadow Ball here anyways, but Surf, not really going to deal too much damage there. The opponent now going to come in with a Galarian Stunfisk. I'm going to look to throw on CMP here with the potential Earthquake. Dynamic Punch is going to connect, and at this point, I'm happy to just no shield. The opponent going to bait with a Rock Slide. That is a big mistake because the opponent now committing to the full farm down. I'm able to reach a second Dynamic Punch. Dynamic Punch gets the knockout, and we flip that matchup. The opponent going to come back in with the Jellicent. They are now 1 away from the next Surf, so I'm going to fire off 1 more Sucker Punch, fire off the Shadow Punch, and Shadow Punch is going to be shielded. Now they come in with a Venusaur, but this is a fine matchup for me. The opponent will have to throw some energy to take me out, but if they don't, well, I'm actually just going to bank another Shadow Punch, come in with Lucario, where we do complete resist everything they can throw. However, of course, this is Lucario we're talking about, so Frenzy Plant still does a lot of damage. At this point, we can just farm up to the Thunder Punch. The opponent swaps back into Jellicent. Absolutely fine with me. A Thunder Punch will get the knockout there, even if they did somehow reach 2 more charge moves into my Lucario. Gengar had that Shadow Punch loaded, and so I would have won that game anyways. But GG's opponent there into the next battle. We're going to see Guzzlord in the leads, of course. Not a great matchup for me. I'm swapping into Kecleon, and unfortunately met with a Tinkaton. Now, of course, I can fire off the Dynamic Punch. However, you're going to see, well, never mind, you're not going to see because the opponent actually ends up shielding there. It's quite surprising to me, but Gigaton Hammer going to get the knockout. What I was going to say is that Dynamic Punch wouldn't quite two-shot them, and of course, Sucker Punches are resisted. So here, I'm going to shield the Bulldoze. You could argue that I shouldn't shield the first just because it's likely they're going to get a debuff there. Then they also swap out and catch a Shadow Punch onto Guzzlord. That is quite unfortunate because after that debuff, I was really considering going for a Drain Punch, boosting up my defense once again, whereas now unfortunately they're able to catch that Shadow Punch there, and Lucario is just going to have a rough time fast move farming them down. I'm going to have to go for a Power Punch, but even then this is not going to get the knockout, but I don't think they've got another charge move loaded, so we can go for that farm down. They come back in with the Tinkaton, and honestly at this point I have to just hope that Gengar can beat whatever's in the back. Of course, they do still have quite a lot of energy here, so what we're going to do, we're going to fire off a Shadow Punch. They should reach a Bulldoze just before I reach back-to-back charge moves, so at this point of course I have to shield this. I'm really hoping it's something weak to the Ghost typing in the back. That's basically my only win condition. So at this point, we overfarm. We don't want to throw it potentially on CMP and risk being caught. So we throw just a little bit too early there. And now their final Pokemon is Empoleon. We've got super effective Drain Punch, but Drain Punch doesn't hit particularly hard there. Even if they had a Shadow, they would have been able to hang on there. And unfortunately, we lose that game. So, GG's opponent there into the next battle. We can see a Talonflame in the lead. Now, this time around, unlike Typhlosion, Talonflame not quite as attack weighted, and if the opponent commits to a full fast move farm down, which they do, I'm going to reach a last second Shadow Punch. Now, here I do make a mistake. I throw after 3 Sucker Punches. I should have thrown after 4 because we always get to another one there, but either way, I don't know if that will really make a huge difference here, but actually, I think it might because I think the opponent, if they go for Fly here, they're going to be 1 away from the next charge move, which means I cannot commit to the full farm down, whereas if we landed 1 more Sucker Punch with our Shadow Gengar, we probably could have committed to that farm down. Now the final Pokemon going to be a Bastion and Jellicent, but Lucario has a shield advantage, so we're firing off the Thunder Punch. Thunder Punch going to connect, and it does hit for super effective damage. At this point, I'm certainly going to shield here. Maybe what I could have done instead is come in with the Kecleon, shield once, and then come out with like close to back-to-back Dynamic Punches, but we are very low. So at this point, we do get the KO with a Thunder Punch. They come back in with the Bastion. I'm going to throw just before they reach a Flamethrower. Now, I did think about swapping out and making the catch. However, Lucario is kind of going to struggle up against the Bastion because we don't have access to Aura Sphere, whereas Kecleon just barely able to reach a Dynamic Punch at the last second, living with 1 HP in a dream, taking out the Bastion, and I'm able to take that game. Now you can see my Kecleon IVs are not very good there, so that was very risky on my end, but we are able to get the win. So GG's to our trainer. Into the next battle, we're going to see a Licky in the lead. Now they do throw after 4, they do full send a Shadow Ball. I was thinking maybe the opponent would try to throw it on good timing. Here we swap out, but we do swap out slightly too early there. I'm not really sure why I swapped out one before they got to the charge move. Either way, they go for a Body Slam, and now they come in with a Gastrodon. Now Gastrodon is very problematic for both the Gengar and especially Lucario, because once again we do have resisted Bullet Punch damage, whereas up against the Kecleon, this is actually my best matchup. Now unfortunately, I'm barely going to miss out on reaching another charge move there, but we have got them very low. So at this point, I'm going to fire off the Shadow Punch. The opponent going to shield there. I'm now going to go for a Drain Punch just because I thought the opponent might try and swap back into Licky. They don't, but Drain Punch does get the knockout. But because we just threw the Drain Punch, we barely miss out on reaching another charge move. Shadow Ball is going to get the knockout. We come in with Lucario, and their final Pokemon is a Tinkaton. Now this game is not over just yet. I have to no-shield the first move because Bulldoze does have a chance to debuff my defense. They don't get the debuff that time around, but we go for a Power Punch bait, and we grab a shield. Now, of course, we can go for a boosted Thunder Punch here. Thunder Punch is going to connect, and it does big damage. Now, at this point, of course, I'm going to have to shield this. They go for another Bulldoze. Bulldoze does get the debuff, and unfortunately, leaves me on 1 HP in a dream there, but they can just come in, double resisted, roll out, farm me down, and we end up losing that game. However, I think if they didn't get the debuff on that second Bulldoze, we're probably healthy enough to live another rollout, reach another charge move, and take out the Licky. But either way, GG to our trainer into the next battle, and this is a very interesting team by the opponent. We're going to see a Medicham in the lead. They say swap into a Primeape, and I'm not going to spoil what their third Pokemon is, but you can probably guess it right now already. But we are going to look to overfarm here. I'm then going to swap out Catch the Rage Fist onto my Kecleon, where of course it is going to be double resisted. They swap back into Medicham. That's fine with me. They are going to go straight for the charge move here. And of course, Dynamic Punch, super effective, takes out the Kecleon. So we're going to come back in with the Gengar, and we are going to massively overfarm. Of course, Shadow Punch is going to hit for super effective damage. It gets the KO, and their final Pokemon is a third fighting type. This time, it's going to be Annihilate, but either way, it's game over. Shadow Punch grabs the final shield. I do wait one turn just to make sure the opponent doesn't catch on to Primeape, and at this point, because we can, we swap into Lucario. We go for the Bullet Punch farm down, and I'm able to take that game. But GG's opponent into the next battle, we're going to see Fearow in the lead. So honestly, not that bad because we're not on Shadow Claw. However, what I am going to do is swap out and look to catch a charge move onto Kecleon. The opponent goes for the Drill Peck there. Of course, Drill Peck and Draw on both of them would be enough damage to take out a Gengar. So might as well go for the Drill Peck, as it does do more damage neutrally, and in case we do try and make a catch there, it just makes more sense. Anyways, they're going to come in with a Tinkaton, and this time around you do see, of course, we land the Dynamic Punch, but that will not two-shot them, but we can now come in with the Shadow Gengar, and I will fire off the Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch is going to be shielded by the opponent, but they overfarm, allowing me to reach another Shadow Punch, and Shadow Punch number 2 from this range actually gets the knockout. We come in with Lucario, and here I'm going to look to shield, and then I will try and commit to a full fast move farm down here. I'm not sure if I would have got the farm down, but the opponent, they did not have the energy, so this is a misplay on my end, and as a result, by throwing a charge move, I allow them to shield, and then reach a last second drill run. Now their final Pokemon is going to be a Licky, and unfortunately, this is where not having Aura Sphere is going to be very costly because we just don't deal that much damage, but I can look to swap out. I'm able to catch a Shadow Ball onto my Shadow Gengar. The opponent cannot settle for a Body Slam, which means I throw the Thunder Punch on CMP. This is, of course, not super effective, but it does just barely get the KO up against the Licky, and I'm able to take that game. So, heading into the next battle, we see Livani in the lead. Now, I do expect Shadow Claw, so I swap out straight away, and that is a big mistake on my end because they're on Bug Bite. Bug Bite would have been double resisted by the Ghost and Poison typing of Shadow Gengar, and honestly, it would have been a very dominant matchup for me. Whereas now, of course, we come in with the Kecleon. I do at least land a Thunder Punch there. Now, honestly, I thought I could come in with the Shadow Gengar and fast move farm them down in just 4 Sucker Punches and only take 1 Gust worth of damage. However, unfortunately, We barely miss out. We are now at half health already as they come in with an absolutely massive Blastoise, by the way. We're going to go for a Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch, going to be shielded by the opponent, but we can reach another Shadow Punch. And here, unfortunately, they will be able to fast move farm me down, so I have to swap out into my Lucario. I'm going to have to tank one charge move. I'm going to shield the first here, just in case the opponent does want to swap back into Levani straight away. But no, they're going to stay in. Of course, Chip with a Hydro Cannon, which is going to deal a lot of damage. Here, honestly, I probably could have overfarmed slightly more than I did, because whilst I am double resisting the Bug Bite damage on Lucario, it still is going to add up over time. Whereas, of course, if I was able to throw slightly earlier, I could swap into my Shadow Gengar, force the energy from the opponent, but Lucario, unfortunately, is literally on 1 HP. They Bug Bite, farm me down before I can Bullet Punch farm them down, and unfortunately, I lose that game. But honestly, if I just stayed in with the Gengar, at least to see what fast move they had, I probably would have won that game. But GG's to that trainer into the next battle, and the opponent actually going to swap out there and catch a resisted Drain Punch onto Azumarill. That is a really heads-up play there, unfortunately for me, because honestly, I just expected Gradilla users, they always just go straight for that Rock Tomb as soon as they get there. So I thought throwing on CMP was the safest bet for me. However, unfortunately, they're going to come in with the Azumarill, go for Thunder Punch, and unfortunately, that's not quite going to get the knockout, or put them into range where we can Bullet Punch farm them down. So we fire off the Power Punch, and Power Punch is going to be shielded. I'm also going to no-shield this, as it will be an Ice Beam. An Ice Beam doesn't get the KO, so I swap into my Kecleon, and the opponent swaps back into Credilli immediately. Rock Tomb, of course, going to debuff my attack stat, and unfortunately, what this is going to mean is that they can just barely live a Dynamic Punch. So Dynamic Punch is going to connect, but they do hang on there. So at this point, I'm going to no-shield the Kecleon as they fire off the Rock Tomb, and then here, I'm going to give as minimal farm as possible. But we're going to see they come back in with the Azumarill. Of course, I was debuffed there. Sucker Punch doesn't deal too much damage. They come in with a Gelatin, and of course, they have to shield at this point. So I'm going to boost up my defense. What I'm hoping to do is allow me to fully fast move farm them down, but it doesn't look like it would have happened. I think it would have been a a simultaneous KO. So here we go for the fast move farm down, but they live with 1 HP and a Dream, taking me out with the bubble damage. And actually, if I didn't allow them to deal damage onto my Kecleon, if I was slightly healthier there, I actually would have won that game, because all I needed was just one more Sucker Punch to land. So in trying to be smart, we actually end up losing that game because of it. But either way, GG's to that trainer. Into the next battle, we see a Primeape in the lead. Now this, unfortunately, is a bit of an awkward matchup because Sucker Punches are resisted damage, so usually I would just be able to Shadow Claw farm them down, but here we play out the 2-shot scenario. We once again catch a Rage Fist where it's double resisted onto Kecleon and force the opponent to stay in with the Primeape and full send a close combat, which of course easily gets the KO. We come back in with the Shadow Gengar, and the opponent's going to come in now with a Charge Bug. We're going to go straight for a Shadow Punch here. Shadow Punch is going to be shielded, but I can reach yet another Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch number 2, of course, going to connect, and it does big damage. Unfortunately, Lucario hitting for resisted fast move pressure. Actually, everything is resisted, but the opponent goes for a double resisted X-Scissor. That makes 0 sense whatsoever, and Power Punch actually gets the knockout from that range. That is huge for me. Now, their final Pokemon is going to be Azumarill, and we're already boosted, so Thunder Punch is going to do quite a lot of damage here. Thunder Punch isn't going to put them into farm down range, but they swap back into Primeape, and they don't throw straight away, which means we can snipe with a Gengar, just 1 away from the Shadow Punch. Shadow Punch gets the knockout, and I'm able to take that game. So, GG's up on there into the final battle of this video, once again leading into a Pharaoh. So once again, we're going to farm up to 5, and then swap out and try and catch a move onto Kecleon. This time it doesn't work out for me. However, they are still going to stay in and throw some energy, so that's fine with me. At this point, maybe I could just fully sacrifice the Kecleon, but actually, I realized I can now shield once, commit to the full fast move, farm down, and come out with a lot of energy. Now, we are very low, so I don't think I'm going to reach 2 charge moves. I go straight for Dynamic Punch, and they come in with a Licky Licky. Now, we do barely miss out on the next charge move. However, we did a lot of damage there. Now, they farm up a ton of energy, but they throw on CMP, so that's fine with me. Power Punch going to grab the final shield from the opponent. So at this point, I think I might as well shield anyways. I don't know what they've got in the bag, but clearly if they're shielding there, then we should be okay. And the opponent is going to have an Oink alone in the back. Now, apologies, I did say final shield. That was the first shield from the opponent. That is the final shield. Now we swap back into our Gengar. I'm expecting the opponent to have Trailblaze and Body Slam, both of which are going to be resisted damage into both my Gengar and my Lucario, so Bullet Punch should be able to connect here. I should be able to tank anything they throw. Body Slam doesn't KO. Bullet Punch gets the farm down, and I'm able to take that game. And so GG's to the opponent there into the next battle, and this is actually the final battle of this video. My apologies once again. We're going to see a Shadow Sableye in the lead. I actually swapped into my Lucario because Kecleon is definitely my best matchup. However, unfortunately met with a Shadow Kanto Ninetales. So we do get them fairly low to the point where I should be able to come in with the Gengar, shield once, and then fully fast move farm down. So that's exactly what we're going to go for here. Also, I should be able to come out of this matchup, I believe, one away. Actually, no, I have the Shadow Punch already loaded. So if they come back in with the Sableye, I will just throw this immediately, as even though they are a Dark type, they're also a Ghost type, so it's going to hit for neutral damage, and it does huge damage as well. The opponent now going to come in with their final Pokemon, which is going to be Empoleon. Unfortunately, though, we are down a shield, and they will outpace us to several moves. So here, I'm thinking about what to do. I think I probably should shield the first charge move here because this is going to be a CMP tie, which unfortunately I'm going to lose. However, I will be able to live this, whereas if I no shield that first move, they can probably just commit to a fast move beatdown. Whereas now, Thunder Punch, going to grab the final shield. I swap into Gengar, and I'm actually doing exactly what I want to do. I'm forcing the opponent to come back in with the Sableye and throw the charge move. However, we don't come out quite with a Thunder Punch loaded. They can just Metal Sound, farm me down, and unfortunately, I lose that final game. So that's going to be it for today's video. If you did enjoy it, please make sure you leave a like, leave a comment letting me know, and as well, don't forget to respond to the question of the day if you haven't done so already. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on post notifications. That way you'll be notified whenever I upload a new video. Now if you want to take your support to the next level, you can become a channel member with perks including early access to new videos, shoutouts at the end of each video, custom loyalty badges, and custom emojis to use in the comments of every video. I want to say a massive thank you to everyone that has become a channel member already. Your support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.